What's up, guys? Welcome back to Split Decisions Podcast. I'm Fitz here with Jeremy. Hi, doing, Jeremy? What's up?
What up, everybody? Just watched the Nuggets Heat game, and Jokic and Murray are 2 OP, bro. I've been saying this.
Me too, dude. The Nuggets are looking unstoppable. Heat haven't beat the Nuggets in Denver since like 2016, I seen.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy Butler's good and all, but not good enough.
Literally. You can't do it all.
Nope.
Yeah, but we got a lot to talk about this week. We're gonna really break down two major things. First being the debut of the Ultimate Fighter, which I think we were both pretty excited about. I thought it was a really good first episode. And then we have a UFC card. Not the greatest UFC card in the world, but still UFC. We didn't get any last week, so happy to have UFC back on. But let's just right before get into some fight announcements. Both the Bonfim brothers got opponents. Those are the two Brazilian brothers who had knockouts in the Brazil card not too long ago. There's a banger in the flyweight division, Tigger and Lumbekov versus Jake Hadley. Hadley's been calling for Mikhailov, so he'll get his try at a different Dagestani first, a little lower level one. If he beats Tiger, he definitely should get that fight with Mikhailov, and that'll be a dope fight. Some big boys throwing down and some good grapplers. Alexander Romanov versus Blagoy Ivanov. Terrence McKinney versus Nazim Sadarikov is a high level lightweight fight of guys outside the top 15. And then another banger at bantamweight. Said Nurmagomedov is going to take on Kyler Phillips. These are all like going down at various points of the summer. And also just came out today was Curtis Blades versus Charlton Almeida is apparently agreed upon as a main event. And that's one everyone was calling for. So it's nice when you get a fight that everyone's been calling for.
Yeah, I mean, out of all the fights you named, that fight easily excites me the most. Two great grapplers, so it's just gonna be exciting. Who's wrestling, who's grappling is gonna come out on top.
Definitely. And it'll definitely test the level of Charlton Almeida. In some other MMA news, we had some cool stories this week and some not so cool stories. Rob Wilkinson is one of a long list of PFL fighters now who have tested positive. They said he was the 10th on the list. He's their champion from this year, and now he's going to be suspended for the rest of the season. Not a great look for PFL. Yeah, 10 fighters and 10 pretty big name guys, a lot of them, 10 pretty notable names.
Yeah, it's crazy. The drug use in MMA is still pretty rampant, even with the advanced doping systems, anti-doping system.
Mhm. Crazy. You really never know how many of the guys are really taking stuff. And
Nah,
also, we seen Alexei Oleinik got knocked out really bad on the Russian regional scene. I mean, he's just way too old to be fighting. And another crazy Russian fight. Did you see what happened with Alexander Elemenko,
yeah,
Fedor's brother? He literally got knocked out by this guy who was like half his size. Ref stops the fight, restarts it. The guy like falls into guard and he just does the laziest, slowest Kimura ever. And like, come on, at least make it look a little real. Like,
yeah. I mean, the rigging's crazy. If you guys haven't seen it, I recommend go looking it up right now. It's pretty obvious. It was a fixed fight from the beginning. I mean, the opponent just literally, as you said, like fell into a submission after KOing him.
yeah, I mean, some Russian mobster of some type got to bag off that fight. Someone.
Yeah,
Right. I mean, I think that pretty much covers most of the news, most of the big headlines, any notable fights that have been made. Let's jump right into this tough recap. I thought it was a really good first episode. I'm a I'm not the hugest fan of tough, but I watch it, I enjoy it, and anything Conor McGregor takes a part in, of course, I'm going to be extra excited for. He's returning coaching it, of course, against Michael Chandler. This is his second time McGregor has coached. The first was his famous season where he just annihilated Uriah Faber and all of Team Alpha Male. Um, and there's a pretty cool format this season. Half of the guys have already been in the UFC, so there's some recognizable names. And the other half, they call them the prospects, but half of these guys are so old. I don't really think you can call prospects. They're just guys who haven't really been in the UFC. Connor got a pick first. He chose the 155 prospects, probably because that's what team his boy is on. Lee Hammond, the guy everyone heard the story. Like Connor came and kind of forced his way, forced these guys in on the show, took some other guys' spots. And then Chandler got the next pick. He got the 135-pound veterans, ex UFC guys. So Chandler ended up with all the ex UFC guys and McGregor all the prospects. So it's pretty easy to follow. Real quick, running down the teams. Chandler with the ex UFC guys has Hunter Azure, who's a Native American fighter, up and down in the UFC. Chandler ranked him as his number one fighter. I was never really impressed with him, to be honest. He does have a win over Chandler's number two guy in the UFC, Brad Katona. Brad Katona has actually won the Ultimate Fighter before, season 27, season I watched live. And he also trains up with Connor, so a little conflict of interest there, between training on Connor's team in real life and then Chandler's team on the show. We'll see how that goes. The number three guy is definitely my pick to win it all. He's a stud. Timur Valiev has some losses in the UFC, but also has some really, really good wins. And then number four, a guy I really am not too familiar with. He fought in the UFC kind of a long time ago. Cody Gibson. And then for Chandler's 155ers, Jason Knight. He's they call him like the country Nick Diaz. He's always been a fighter I've been a fan of. Funny guy, kind of just like that down south hick personality. Austin Hubbard, former LFA guy, solid, nothing impressive, nothing crazy. Roosevelt Roberts, who was 4-3 in the UFC, really should have been 4-4. He got a one loss overturned because Kevin Kroom tested positive for marijuana. And then Kurt Holloway, who's kind of like a veteran, he fought a row of killers in the UFC. He fought like three really tough guys: Shane Burgos, Raoni Barcelos, and Thiago Moisés. So he had some bad luck with the matchmaking. But those are Chandler guys. Any of those guys stuck out as guys you were looking to really see back in the UFC or?
I mean, as you said, Timur Valiev is a pretty good fighter. He did lose twice to Jack Shore and Trevin Jones, but Trevin Jones tested positive for marijuana after, so that got overturned to a no contest. Other than that, a lot of wins, and his fight against Raoni Barcelos was a pretty good, pretty wild fight. And I mean, just the guy we saw this past weekend, Roosevelt Roberts, obviously got pretty brutally KO'd by Ignacio Bahamondes, but this guy's a dynamic striker who's also got power in his hands.
Yeah, and then moving on to Connor's team of the 135ers, his number one ranked guy, Mando Rodriguez. He's the guy who fought Raul Rosas on the Contender Series and lost. So I guess that's his claim to fame. Trevor Wells, he's not really a guy I'm too familiar with. Same with Carlos Vega, and then Rico Disquala. He fought on Contender Series as well and hasn't really been very active at all since. So kind of some weird choices with the prospects, not really huge names. As far as 155, a little more recognizable names. You of course have Connor's boy Lee Heyman, Nate Jennerman, who's been around forever. He's fought in PFL, fought in LFA, fought for the LFA title. Aaron McKenzie, another pretty recognizable name, wrestler, grappler, strong guy, fought in some pretty recognizable organizations. And then Lando Quinones, a guy I really don't know too much about. Obviously with prospects, it's more of a wait and see for most of them. We're gonna have to see how they do. But yeah, first fight of the night was Roosevelt Roberts versus Nate Jennerman, and it wasn't a very long one. Roosevelt Roberts knocked him out there in quick fashion. It was a little bit of an early stoppage, in my opinion. But Roosevelt Roberts showing that since he was on that receiving end of that highlight reel knockout, like he said, he's turned things around. He won 2 fights outside of the UFC since being cut, and he looked impressive today. It was a quick. There was really not much else he could have done, dude. He threw about 3 punches, landed all 3, and finished the job in like 8 seconds. I couldn't believe it. Got to be. They didn't say it was the fastest. They said it's one of the fastest in TUF history, but it's one of the fastest knockouts in UFC history. 8 seconds is insane.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, going into that fight, they were hyping it up sort of as like the striker versus grappler. Jennerman with all those submission victories, and then Roberts with all his KOs and his his boxing. And it came in that it just seemed like Jennerman was kind of, I don't know, like he was seemed nervous. Seemed like he didn't really know what to do. We saw him training against that like 1-2 before the fight, like he was dodging it and catching it, and he gets in the fight and he doesn't do anything about it. Um, so Roosevelt Roberts looked good, man. I mean, he could be a guy that wins the whole thing. Um, didn't really see much from him though, but what we did see, as I said, it was good. It was impressive.
Yeah, couldn't look better than that. I mean,
Yeah,
but yeah, that's pretty much it for the episode. Not a whole lot to talk about. Besides a fight. As the season gets on and as we start to get to know these new guys, we'll look forward, give predictions who we think to win. But I'm definitely excited for the season of TUF. I think it's a good one. I'm excited to see some drama brewing between Chandler and
yeah.
McGregor for the build-up. That's going to be an epic fight next year, early next year, hopefully. So yeah, it's gonna be a great season. And then let's jump right into the card, man. Not the greatest card in the world, but happy happy to get UFC anytime. First fight of the night is two like kind of slow plotting light heavyweights. They both also fought at 285. Maxim Grishin versus Felipe Lins. Lins is more of a striker, while as Grishin, excuse me, more of a grappler. Not an exciting fight, this one. I doubt it's going to be like some sort of war. I know it's not going to be a high pace fight because both these guys are pretty low volume. Lynn's a little bit naturally bigger guy. He's coming off a win. So is Grisham against William Knight, but not much to say here. I think the fight probably goes to decision, and I'd edge Felipe Lins.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, like there's not too much to say about this fight. If I had to choose one to win, I guess I'd say Felipe Lins. He's coming off two wins. Last win, he knocked out Vince St. Preux in the first round in 49 seconds, actually. Now, granted,
Yeah,
this
literally.
isn't the same. This isn't prime St. Preux.
Or even like this OSP is like really
Yeah,
kind of just show up for
but
paycheck.
it's still OSP, man. He's got
Yeah.
some pretty good striking. And then, prior in his career, before his UFC days, Philip Lins did win the 2018 PFL heavyweight tournament. So he's got we know he's got a little bit of talent. He can do something. So we'll see.
Yeah. Like I said, these opening cards, a lot of them were kind of just going to fly through. This one, not too familiar with either of these guys, but both highly touted grapplers. Juan Lacerdo, who's a longtime training reporter down at Nuevo Now, down with Jose Aldo, all those guys. He made his debut against Cody Stamann, which is a real tough UFC debut. Stamann's no joke. He's 12-2 overall. He's a grappler. He has a lot of submissions. Blackshear also has a pretty, good record, 12-5. He's also 0-1 in the UFC with a tough debut as well to Javid Basharat. So some similarities between these guys. Both grapplers, both the majority of the wins coming by decision, both 0-1 in the UFC, but they both had really tough opponents in their first fight. So this fight, we're really kind of going to find out where either of these guys fit in the UFC. And I think Luan Lacerdo is just a little bit higher level, especially in a grappling type matchup.
Yeah. I mean, Damon Blackshear hasn't really done anything. He got a draw against Yusuf Zalal, who like Yusuf Zalal is pretty good. Then lost to Farid Basharat. You know, not much to say here.
Yeah. And really not much to say in this next fight. This is gonna be a loser goes home for whoever loses this fight between Jin Frey and Elise Reed. Elise Reed is 2-3 in the UFC, but it's a really bad 2-3. She should be like 1-4. Her last fight, she got submitted by a Muay Thai specialist, a pure Muay Thai fighter in Loma Lookboonmee. Terrible look. Jin Frey, she's actually a pretty decent fighter, but she's kind of on the tail end of her career. She's older. She's always been small in the UFC. She's truly like a 105 pounder. She has good like movement. She moves around a lot, but she does a lot of punch in the air and yelling, and just a really annoying fighter to watch, in my opinion. Not entertaining, that Caitlin Chukagan style. Um, but yeah, Frey's just an impressive, human being in general. She has like a double master or something. She's like a doctor and a UFC fighter, which is pretty sick. But who cares about this fight? to be honest, unless you're
Yeah,
betting on it. The next one too, another guys, decent UFC fighters, but not really guys. A lot of big names. Daniel Santos versus Johnny Munoz. Santos is one in the UFC. He had a really nice win his last fight against someone who we're going to talk about in a little bit, John Castanado. He's also a Brazilian guy training down in Diego Lima's camp. These guys were supposed to fight about a month ago. It's rescheduled for now. Munoz was a guy who came into the UFC undefeated with a lot of hype. He's been 2-2 since then with some ups and downs. Had a really bad stoppage loss to Tony Gravely. Looked decent in his last fight against Ludwig Shalinian, but Shalinian's not the highest level opponent. I'd favor Santos here. I think he can probably negate some of the wrestling of Munoz and do some damage with his hands.
yeah. Neither of these guys are bad. They're both, you know, kind of younger guys. Not really too deep into their careers. This is a decent fight for both of them. I'm excited to see two younger guys. They're gonna have energy. So
Yeah, this I could definitely see this being a really good fight. I definitely want to say that, even though these aren't the two well-named guys, these guys both typically bring it. Unless Munoz kind of just lays on him for 3 rounds, which I don't know necessarily if we see happening, but I agree. I think it'll be a pretty good fight. This next one, it probably won't be a great fight because Andrei Arlovski, as much as the legend he is, he's kind of just turned into like a point fighter at this time in his career. The fact that he debuted in the '90s and is still around is crazy. I mean, he's 7-3 in his last 10 fights, which I mean, for a guy who's been 40 in all those fights at heavyweight, he's coming off a loss to Marco Lima, a submission loss, and he's probably really at the tail end. I would hope if he gets a win here, he kind of just hangs it up because Arlovski's really a legend, a guy I really like. Excuse me. He's facing Dontel Mays, who whatever 2-3 in the UFC, came in with some hype off contender series. He's lost to some pretty tough guys though, like Cyril Gahn, but he just hasn't been impressive. He should, as a young guy, you want to be able to go out there and take out Arlovski, but I think Arlovski might be a little too tricky for him, and I hope he goes out there and gets a win.
yeah, I mean, Arlovsky is either at the top of like one of the top most fights in UFC or most wins in UFC. He's a legend. Facing a younger guy, Dante Mays, who's really just like very athletic. I know him mostly. He's imprinted in my brain mostly as a guy who lost to Cyril Gahn. That was the fight that really put Cyril Gahn on the map, at least for me. Andrei Arlovsky, just a guy who's decent everywhere. He's a guy that is going to brawl. He's going to come. He's going to try to KO you. A vet versus a younger guy, Arlovsky. He's up there in the win category. He might just be fighting now, just to like get that record, man. So I'm rooting for Arlovsky here. He's a legend.
Yeah, we got two guys going for UFC win records with Tim Miller fighting later on the card. But next fight on the card is John Castaneda on short notice taking on Marin Garafov. Castaneda is a pretty, good prospect coming in. He's been a pretty big favorite, I think, in most of his fights. But he's been 2-2 since coming into the UFC, so hasn't had a lot of success or hasn't had as much success as he was expected to. This kid Marin Garafov is coming in on short notice, like I said. He's one of two Tajikistan fighters fighting on short notice on this card. He lost his contender series fight, and since then has won 2 fights in a row. With a really impressive win in his last fight, an LFA fight by spinning back kick. So he definitely deserved the call up to the UFC, especially coming on short notice. I think it's a pretty tough fight for Castaneda, but he should be able to take care of business. But really, I'm not too familiar with Marin Garifov, so he's gonna have to show me something here.
Yeah, Castaneda has had kind of a rocky UFC career. Came in as you said, UFC debut. He lost to Nathaniel Wood. He's won a couple since then. He's lost another one since then. He's had some hype around him, but that's kind of faded. On the other hand, Murin Gafurov, According to Topology, he's the number one pro bantamweight in the southeast of Asia, which like I guess doesn't really say that much, but he's number one. So he's number one in something. You know, since losing on the Contender Series, he has won twice, as you said. I'm looking forward to this. I mean, I think Gurafov is a guy that could string some wins together. And
Make a
maybe,
name for himself. Yeah,
yeah. And Castellano is the guy to do it. I mean, he's a guy like if you beat him, you belong in the UFC, or at least you could make your way towards the top 15.
definitely. And moving down on the card, this one I am excited for because Lesky dos Santos is one of my personal favorite fighters. He's taking on another Dagestani. This is now the 30 spot. Khabib's cousin, Abubakar Nurmagomedov, like the worst of the Khabib clan, has a loss to like David Zawad in his career, which is really embarrassing. But Aleski dos Santos is just action packed, crazy, wild. He's not bad on the ground, has some good submissions, and is dangerous and wild on the feet. Abu Bakar is just gonna try to wrestle him, stay on top of him, smother him, stay technical. But I hope the unorthodox style of Dos Santos can give Abu Bakar some problems, and hope he knocks him out. To be honest, flatlines him, and I hope Khabib is in the corner watching.
Hmm. Yeah, I
It's gonna
mean,
be a tough fight. Yeah.
this is probably this is probably the fight I'm looking forward to the most this weekend. Two guys who are like pretty good strikers. I mean, yeah, I mean, straight up, two guys who are pretty good strikers. Alexi Dos Santos is violent. We've seen him have some crazy knockouts. The problem I have with Dos Santos is that, his career has been kind of rocky. It's like his career has been marred by injuries and inconsistency and inactivity. Alexi Dos Santos like gets a win and then gets injured and then loses a couple of times and gets a win. That's maybe he gets two wins, then gets injured and loses again. But I'm just super excited. I mean, these are two guys who are action packed. Alexi Dos Santos has a win over Sean Strickland, so you can't really, you can't fault him on that. I mean, that's a great win. Anytime an Nurmagomedov fights, like I'm tuning in. I don't even care, just because of the last name. This guy's probably one of the. This guy is related to Habib and Umar and Usman, but he's probably, the worst out of them. 17-3 and 1 overall. So I think if I had to give a prediction for this fight, I'd probably take Dos Santos, but I could very well see Abubakar, kind of just riding this out, pinning Dos Santos against the fence and just kind of jockeying for position the whole time, and winning a unanimous decision.
Which would suck. I would hate to see that. And then next is the second of the other short notice Tajikistani guys. I don't know if this guy's boys with the other one. His name's Mohammed John Naimov, I think. He's taking on Jamie Malarkey, who's a pretty fan favorite fighter, Australian, one of the lads goes in there looking to knock you out. I'm not too big of a fan of Jamie Malarkey. I don't think he's that great. So I think this I don't know nothing about this guy, Mohammed John, but definitely I think anyone who goes in there can beat Jamie Malarkey. He's not some world beater, but just kind of the one of the fights we're gonna have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Jamie Malarkey's not a world beater, but he's a guy that is going to bring the action. Um, he's won his last two fights. He did lose to Jalen Turner before that. He's beaten Kama Worthy, who's another guy who's like pretty violent. Jamie Malarkey welcoming this guy to the UFC. Uh, it's a, it's a, I guess it's a pretty tough UFC debut. I mean, it's a guy who has some experience, who is you're probably gonna get hit at least once or twice by him. We'll see. We'll see how Jamie Malarkey's opponent fares against that kind of power and kind of the weird style.
Yeah, he's definitely a good striker, but like I said, I think it's a winnable matchup. Next fight on the card, I have no idea why it's this high up, why it's the main card fight. I really barely know either of these girls. Two Brazilians, Corrine Silva versus Caitlin Souza. Corrine Silva's a kind of a heavy favorite, I guess, because she has some UFC experience, but not much to say here. I don't know if you want to say anything, but
Nah.
yeah. This next fight though is going to be a banger. I promise you, this is a banger. These guys are both Flyweight is awesome. It's always awesome because the guys are so high level, so technical. But these guys, especially Tim Elliott, Victor Almeno, two of the best ass kicks in the entire UFC, two really high volume guys. Tim Elliott put on one of the best performances of his career. He's fighting with a lot going on in his personal life. Obviously, we know what went down with his boy pretty much fucking his wife on his wedding night. I mean, he's got some demons going into the cage. And on top of that, all the drama going on with James Krause. I don't even know who he's training with, who's head coaches anymore. But Tim Elliott's a veteran. He's been around the block, and you know what you're gonna get. He's kind of only lost to the top guys. This is a big step in competition for Moreno, who's 3-1 in the UFC, so he's deserving of this step up. And this is gonna be a banger, I promise. But I'm voting for Tim Elliott. That's my guy.
Yeah, I mean, Tim Elliott might not be himself outside of the cage. His wife just got cheated on him with one of his teammates. But Tim Elliott is always going to bring it inside the cage, man. Like when you watch a Tim Elliott fight, he's going to be active. He's going to do what he wants to do. He's going to have his game plan. You kind of that he's going to fight the way he wants to fight. Coming into this fight, I mean, Victor Altamirano has a 4-inch reach advantage. So we'll see how that plays against Tim Elliott, who's a quick guy, always active in the ring, in the octagon. But Victor Altamirano has some good stats, man. So
A
we'll
really high
see.
striking output.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then third highest fight on the card, Jim Miller is taking on this kid Jesse Butler on 2 days' notice. Jim Miller, legend, of course, most wins UFC history, looking to bounce back after a tough fight against Alexander Hernandez. Miller, you know what, he's a really good grappler, crafty veteran, has some power in his right hand. From New Jersey, so I'm gonna rock with him. And he's fighting this guy. He was supposed to fight Jared Gordon. I don't know how Jared Gordon was even scheduled to fight because he literally just got knocked out like
yeah,
3 weeks ago. So I'm kind of glad we don't see that. But we'll see what this kid Jesse Butler's about. He's on a 5-fight win streak, but I'm not familiar with him. So
yeah. I mean, Jim Miller was about to fight an opponent who literally just got like knocked out cold by a head clash. Now he's fighting this guy Jesse Butler's making his UFC debut. Jim Miller's looking for history right here in this fight. I wish that the UFC just hyped it up more, man. I mean, I think that you could probably get the casual fan in on this kind of fight, in on watching this kind of fight, if you just marketed this fight as like, oh, look at this legend, he's about to get the most wins in UFC history. Like, I feel like the UFC just needs to make him more of a little of a gimmick, and they could get some real hype surrounding Jim Miller, but instead it's just, he's going in to fight Jesse Butler.
yeah, and Jesse Butler's definitely coming in here looking to make a name off Jim Miller, but
Yeah,
A10 isn't going to let that happen easily. Hopefully not, at least. And co-main event of the evening is a decent one. Not great, but two kind of like mid 145ers. Like these guys are
yeah,
both just mid as hell. Daniel Pineda, who had a really good win in his last fight. I'll give him that. Versus Alex Caceres, who had a tough fight in his last fight, got dominated. Um, these guys are both typically strikers. I think Caceres has a speed advantage while Pineda will have the power. But yeah, overall this is a decent fight. I could see it going to decision, being a close fight. Could see Caceres kind of just outpointing Pineda on the feet. Pineda might look to wrestle a little bit. Who don't know, but these guys both have a ton of experience inside and outside the UFC, and it should be a pretty good one. Both these guys always show up.
yeah. I mean, Alex Caceres came into the UFC with tons of hype, man. I mean, he had the fight of the night on the Ultimate Fighter finale against Martin Bravo, and then his first fight in the UFC loses to Kron Gracie, and in that fight, Kron Gracie just took Caceres down and kind of held him there. But didn't really do too much, and Caceres wasn't able to defend really anything. I don't see that happening in this fight. I don't see Daniel Pineda like dominating Caceres on the ground like that. But it could happen that Caceres, uses a lot of his energy and Pineda just holds him down. It could very well happen. Daniel Pineda is coming off a win against Tucker Lutz, submission guillotine, who finished him with a submission, a guillotine choke. Tucker Lutz is no slouch. It was the performance of the night. on Vera versus Sandhagen. Like he won the performance of the night over Sandhagen, which was uh you know that's how you know it was a good performance. When you go to Alex Caceres' record, like he's won 6 of his last 7. And his only loss was against Sodiq Youssef, who's like Sodiq Youssef is a
No
solid
joke. Yeah.
fighter. Yeah. Uh Caceres just KO'd Julian Erosa, which was a crazy knockout, a head kick. Um, but we'll see, man. I'm a huge Alex Caceres fan. Always have, always will be. And he's stringing some wins together, man. There's not really any hype around him, but winning 6 of your last 7, man, that's hard.
Very impressive. Yeah. And then we got a very high level, possibly title eliminator or flyweight main event. KKF France, action packed, fan favorite striker, taking on Amir ALBAZI, who's more of a prospect. He's a very high level grappler. This is his first main event, his first maybe even main card fight. Who knows? But he's very good. He's very legit on the ground. This is a striker versus grappler fight. We've seen Kai Car France struggle with grapplers before. Albizi is good all around, but he's definitely going to be looking to take this fight to the ground and submit Kai Car France, while Kai Car France is going to look to keep it stand-in. Being honest, I've seen some holes over the career in Kai Car France in the grappling, and you just don't want to go into a fight against a guy like Amir Albizi with holes in your grappling game. So I'd probably be favoring Amir Albizi. But what's your take on this fight, Jeremy? Who do you got taking the main event?
I mean, just predictions overall, it's kind of hard to say. This is obviously like the stereotypical striker versus grappler matchup, but this is a big step up from ALBAZI. His last fight was Alessandro Costa, and his fight before that was Francisco Figueiredo. This is a huge step up for him. I like both of these guys. I honestly can't really say who I think is going to win. I think if I had to choose, I guess I'd say Albazi, and that's purely because the grappling I think is more consistent than Kakar Francis striking, if that makes any sense. But Amir Albazi is like a 2 time Swedish wrestling champion. This guy's great. And then you look at Kaikar France. Kaikar France has looked really good recently. We know he lost versus Brandon Moreno, but he was winning a lot of that fight. He might have not been winning like the big moments, but he was winning a good amount of that fight. And Takara France is explosive, man. He could KO you at any time. When you look at Emil Bazi, like his grappling's really good, and he has some pretty offensive wrestling. When it comes to his striking though, like Emil Bazi's striking is kind of boring. It's very fun to. It's like it just kind of
Defensive,
sucks to be honest.
defensive.
Yeah, it's super defensive. Like, he's not going to make a mistake. He's not going to leave himself out there, but he's also not going to KO you, really. At least he's definitely not going to KO Kai Car France.
That
Um,
would be crazy.
yeah, on the feet, yeah. I could see Almir Abazi taking Kai Car France down and grappling him. When it comes to the flyweight division, I mean, I was looking at Askar Askarov for the longest time as like the guy, the new upcoming like East kind of Russian guy, wrestler, but he lost to Kai Car France. Kai Car France beat him, and now Askar Askarov has been released from the UFC. And now Amir Albazi's taking his place. I mean, Amir Albazi is a great wrestler. Um, Looking to win the 6th in a row.
Yeah, and he called for a title fight if he wins. Obviously a Pantoja has to be first, but after that, I think yeah, there's not too many guys at the top of the division who would deserve it more than Amir Albizi. Maybe he has to get one more in after that, but maybe like Brandon Royval or someone like that. That would be a real good one, real high level grappling fight.
Yeah.
But this is gonna be a good one. Kai Car France is a great striker. We shouldn't underestimate him. But yeah, I mean, I think you guys should all definitely be aware of that Almir Albizi is gonna be someone to watch, and he's very technical, very skilled on the map.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that pretty much covers it, man. Anything else?
No.
I had a great time talking the fights. I'm excited to come back here in a couple days and we'll recap everything that went down. I'm sure there'll be some other stories over the weekend. But yeah, UFC is going to be really putting out a lot of content for us this summer with the Ultimate Fighter, of course, a great fights they put on. and Dana White Contender Series. We got PFL coming back soon with, who knows who's fighting with half the fighters suspended.
Hmm.
And we're gonna be covering it all on the Split Decisions podcast. So we hope you guys keep tuning in.
Yep.